So hi everybody, I'm David. I work at Doodle since about 2008, and as you might have guessed, we're using Puppet at Doodle, and I'd like to show you a few things and how we use Puppet at Doodle and what you can do and how we use it. Table of contents, not very interesting. Yeah. So I'll start with our infrastructure. This is more or less the most important Doodle servers. There are a few other machines which are not on this slide, like build server and some test servers and another Xen host, and it's not very interesting. Basically, we have two entry servers which run Apache and mod.jk. Mod.jk connects to Tomcat servers. Both entries can connect to both Tomcats for failover and load balancing. There's a bunch of database servers. At the moment we use MySQL and MongoDB in parallel. So basically there are two MySQL masters which work in a failover setup. So there's only one active master at a time. But if it fails, the Tomcats can fail over to the other one. Each of these masters has its dedicated slave, so in case that master fails, we still have one master and an up-to-date copy of the database. Then there's also the MongoDB replica set, which replication is handled internally by MongoDB. It consists of four up-to-date nodes, and then there's an additional time-delayed node, and also another slave for MySQL, which is also delayed by 1 hour. The hardware varies quite a lot. We have a gateway for the admin network, which is a little geode, and of course database servers, which are a bit more beefed up. There are also an external virtual machine and some virtual machines we host our own. And in total it's like 14 servers, of course with the ones not shown here, and I think about 17 or 18 operating system installations. Okay, so with this, it's not that many servers, but still we have a few challenges. Of course we want to keep the configuration in sync on all servers, because it kind of sucks if you log into a server and type vim and it shows command not found, then you install vim and then you notice that syntax highlighting is not working, and I don't like that. I want to have it installed on all the servers. We also have like usual issues. I installed this 1.5 years ago, and it kind of I could make it work back then, but now I cannot make it work again. What did I do? Yeah. And of course, if someone else changes something, it might stop working, and you have no clue. Usually you have no clue what changed and why it might have stopped working. Another issue is with backups, because I don't like to back up the whole etc directory on the Linux one, because if you want to restore it, maybe I don't want to replicate the exact setup I had before, but I want to install, say, a new version of the operating system, and then a full backup of the etc directory doesn't really help, because I don't know what files are still in the original version as provided by the package and which files have been changed. On servers, there's always the issue of user management. Well, there aren't many users, but still a few. And I don't want to use LDAP because it's simply overkill. But still I have to keep the service in sync and have all the users on all the machines. And we also have obviously a few custom components which we want to distribute, like GIP database, some Unix plugins, backup scripts, whatever. So in 2010 we started using Puppet. Puppet is a declarative language, and the way it's built is, in practice, you have one Puppet master and you have as many clients more or less as you wish, and the clients connect to the Puppet master to fetch their configuration. Puppet is built so that the configuration is highly reusable. Of course, The servers often have different configuration, but large parts are usually the same, but there are subtle differences, and Puppet handles that quite well. It has a few mechanisms to deal with that. It has ready-to-use constructs for common tasks and for some common software, and it even supports changing configuration files, and it supports quite a few syntaxes like some like the SSH server configuration files and many others. So by using Puppet, what you get is up-to-date documentation, because Puppet describes what your server should look like, or actually looks like. You can keep the configuration in any version control system, so you get the history with all the changes. You need a kind of centralized configuration backup. There's all the changes you do on your servers are in this central repository. You don't need to back up anything from the etc directory. So the only thing you have to back up really is your actual application data, like your database or users files, and you don't have like precious servers which you cannot replicate, which you cannot lose because the configuration is valuable, because all the configuration is in Puppet. So the server itself has no real value except, of course, for the hardware and possibly the user's data. But the configuration on the server is can be reproduced at any time. You can move services between the servers because you know the configuration. You can just apply it to another server. You can clone the servers. And then there's this thing called DevOps, and if you look it up on the internet, there are many people talking about it, and everyone thinks of something a bit differently when it comes to DevOps. But that's what the Puppet guys call DevOps, is like we try to apply some principles of software engineering to operations, like keeping track of the history, like possibly multiple people or even the software developers working on the server configuration. That I won't go further into this because it's fun. Okay. Of course, the configuration may contain secrets, and a fake Puppet master could inject any configuration he wants into your service. So we need some kind of authentication. Puppet does this by using a more or less standard public key infrastructure, and well, you don't have to worry about cryptic OpenSSL commands because Puppet has a nice abstraction for this. Basically, you just start a new server, and it will connect to your Puppet master, and Puppet master will tell you that there's a new node. In this case, it's working.google.com with this host key, and you can just sign this certificate signing request, and Puppet will do the rest for you. And of course, you can revoke certificates and pre-install the certificates on some servers and do whatever you like. But the basic use case is really easy. Okay, so let's look at some simple Puppet rules. This is what Puppet calls a type. It's for distributing a file. Then there's the handle, which can be an arbitrary string, or it can be the target file in this example. If this is an arbitrary string, you have to specify the target file separately by an additional parameter here. Well, it's kind of self-explanatory, and this is where Puppet gets the actual file. This is the package name, and this is the actual file within the package. You'll see later how that works. Okay. So, different example, which is like what I have to do every day, like installing user accounts, and in this case group and a user. Again, you have the handle, which is the user, the username in this case. The group and the username. It manages the home directory, the shell. We use numeric IDs because we want to have the same IDs on all servers. Because if you just tar some files and untar them on another machine, you want file permissions to stay correct. Yeah. Now, this is for setting up users. If you want to remove users, you might get the idea that you can simply remove these rules, but that doesn't work. Because Puppet only cares about what you specify. It doesn't care about what you don't specify. So if you just remove those rules, then Puppet will stop caring and will stop doing anything about this user. So in this case, the solution is to use this ensure parameter, which was present before and in this case should be absent, and then Puppet will ensure that this user is not present on your server. This is just to show that Puppet can control a very, very small part of your servers and will just leave the rest of your server alone if you don't want it. If you don't want to touch it. Okay. A little more complex example. Say you want to enable sync cookies. As you probably know, there's this file called etcsyscontrol.conf, which you can set up to initialize any settings on your Linux machine when the kernel boots. But if we just change that file, we would have to reboot the server, and we don't want to reboot servers, of course. So this is like a two-stage process. One is this Augeas type, which again has a handle, and this Augeas can modify configuration files. So what you do is you give it a context, and from this context, Augeas can look up, uses a so-called lens such that it knows how the syntax of that configuration file works. And this changes thing here is more or less the same, no matter what configuration file you use. And in this case, it just sets this parameter to 1, and Augeas will handle the actual syntax of that file. And of course, we need to apply that setting after we've done this, and that's what notify is for. And again, you can see here how the handle is used. So there's this exec setSync cookies, and that's just this one. Don't worry about the uppercase and lowercase e. It's supposed to be that way. I don't really know why, but it works like this. And the exec type, it has, among other things, it has a command parameter. So it will just like tell the Linux kernel to enable sync cookies. And this is needed because if we didn't have this one, the exec rule type would be executed every time Puppet runs, which is by default every half an hour, and that's not necessary. So with the refresh only, it will only be executed once after it has been notified by this type. Okay. Then there's the dependencies. Of course, you cannot install software and do configuration changes in any order. Depending on what software you install, you have to stick to some order. And in this case, what we're doing is installing a package for Apache, which is the Apache 2, npm worker, whatever. Again, the ensure with installed in this case, because we want the package. Then there's the service type, which basically ensures that the service is running, which can be, well, which is, in some cases it's kind of nice, but it can be quite annoying. For instance, if you want to do some maintenance and shut down Apache and Puppet runs, it will start it again. So maybe you don't want that, but I've put it here as an example. But of course the service only works if the package is installed, so there's this dependency with the require statement from the service to the package. Then we also want to disable like the default Apache site. So again, we have dependency, and in this case, we run this command to disable the default site. And here we use the exec a bit differently than we did before. We use this only if condition, which is like executing test and just basically it's just checking that this file is present. So if the default site symlink is present, it will remove it. Again, we use the notify mechanism, and in this case, the service will be restarted if it gets notified. If there are multiple notifies, it will only be restarted once after the whole Puppet rules have been executed. So here's the second example. We might want to enable mod rewrite again with the dependency and the command to enable mod rewrite, and here we use more or less the opposite of only if, which is unless, and again we just check if a file is present or absent in this case. Okay, slightly more complicated example just to show what you can do with Puppet. In this case, this is for the Xen DOM0, which tries to run some virtual machines. And what it does basically is it checks if a Xen kernel is installed, it checks if the network interface is configured. Well, then there has to be some Xen bridge. It checks that like the LVM module is absent and the configuration file for this virtual machine is absent. So basically, if Xen is ready to run, but the virtual machine does not exist, then it executes this command. And well, it's basically an external tool provided by Xen. And what this does, it bootstraps a new virtual machine with Debian pre-installed. And there's a nice trick to it. It supports this roll thing, which is, I think, basically another shell script, which is executed after the virtual machine has been bootstrapped. And this roll script will install Puppet within the virtual machine, and it will install some configured certificates, which are distributed over here by this file type. So basically what this does, it will create a new virtual machine with Puppet on it, and that virtual machine will immediately start to install the software it needs to run. So given this manifest and a few others, you can like instantly create your build server with this kind of script. Okay, so we've seen quite a few Puppet rules, but we have to know how they are organized in practice. So Puppet uses this notion of classes and modules, and in the file system it's laid out like this. It's etc Puppet modules, then you have the package name, the module name, and then you have basically two directories, which is one for files that need to be distributed and one for the manifests, which contain the actual Puppet rules. And that's more or less the default file name for the default class, which can look like this. So here we have the file type as before and just a class around it. There's not the strict rule that the package name, the module name and the class name must be the same, but you better do it, otherwise Puppet will not find the dependencies, and it's just not really worth it. Then Puppet also supports subclasses, and they're actually quite nice to support multiple configurations on different servers. For instance, in this case, we might have multiple servers which run Apache, and maybe all of them need PHP, but the dev server has a different configuration than, say, the server that runs your blog. So we have three subclasses. One is the Apache 2, it's hardly readable, Apache 2 install, then the Apache 2 PHP, and the Apache 2 dev. And the Apache 2 install subclass will, what you've seen before, basically just install the packages and set up Apache, maybe disable the default site. The PHP subclass will install PHP, but it will also include the Apache install subclass. So there's a dependency from here to here with the require statements. So you can include just Apache 2 PHP, and it will install Apache and then install PHP. Or maybe you want to set up the dev server, which is basically even more like the Apache 2 dev subclass. It includes the install, it includes PHP, it includes some SSL files, and, well, the configuration for the dev development server itself. But at some point you have to specify which node or which server actually does install what or uses which modules. And that's done with this node statement. And that's basically just the host name of the server that should use these rules. And it's laid out like this in the file system. So you have the modules directory and you have the manifests directory, which has a nodes file and the templates file. And so we have these node statements, but you can also build these kind of templates, but the templates are just another use case for the class, and they can include whatever you want. So in our case we have this basic class and it has a huge list of software. It installs users, it installs common tools, it installs postfix, whatever. So basically all of our servers just include, or at least include, this basic class, and they have quite a nice base setup which already does most of the things, apart from the specific services that we need. Another mechanism to have this to have generic configuration are these facts, and the facts can be used, like in this example, to install different configuration files on different servers. So here we have a normal file type, and we want to set up the replication for MySQL, and that's another nice trick which you can use for most complex services. You often have these conf.d directories, and they're really handy if you use Puppet, because with these conf.d directories you can just deploy configuration files with the file type, and you can have multiple configuration files and different configuration file combinations for different servers, and it will all work quite nicely. So, of course, this requires the MySQL server, and here we have a little trick which is a feature of the file type. You can specify more than one file, and the idea is that if the first one is present, then Puppet will use it, and if it's not present, it will fall back to the second one. And Puppet supports these facts, and one of the facts is the host name. So it will just take this file. Let's say if your server is called db3, then it will take the file .conf.db3 and will install it or copy it to that path. And if there's no such file, like maybe you have some servers without replication, then this one can be just an empty file, and it will take that one for all other servers. Some example facts. You have this tool called Factor, which you can run on any machine where Puppet is installed, and it will just print out the facts. As you can see, there's domain. Probably one of the more useful things is your distribution name. For instance, if you want to install packages and the packages have different names on different versions of your distribution, and you need to use different distributions or different versions of your distribution, you can use this to distinguish within the Puppet manifest between the different servers. Yeah. And another nice feature of these facts is that it's really easy to write your own, and the Puppet Master provides an HTTP JSON REST API to access these facts about all hosts that ever have been connected to the Puppet Master. So, let's see. Sorry, my laptop isn't that fast. So maybe not the absolute best use case, but one we use is this one. So these are basically just facts, and one fact says if a server needs to be rebooted, and another fact says what packages have some updates pending. And what this page basically does is just it requests. It has some jQuery code, and it builds this table, and it just gets those facts directly from the Puppet master. And if you want to see how it's done, you can, I guess, you can get the presentation from somewhere after that. So there's a Ruby script which provides this fact, then there's a bash script which actually, well, this is the case for pending updates. You have the Ruby script, you have the bash script which runs aptitude, basically, well, that could probably be done in here directly, but I'm not the Ruby expert, so I prefer to use bash script. Then there's some JavaScript code with some Ajax. Here you can see the URLs. So it's really simple to use, like search facts.pending updates not equal empty string, and well, build up table. Of course, you have to worry a bit about authentication, the way we do it. Puppet Master normally just listens on the loopback interface, and I've just configured Apache's mod proxy to access this port. To access the Puppet Master by the loopback interface, and Apache will do client certificate authentication. So here's the current state of Puppet at Doodle. As I said, we started somewhere middle of 2010. Puppet still evolves sometimes quite a lot, and at some point I had to rewrite quite a few of our modules, but they actually got better, so it's not a bad thing. And of course, at first I didn't understand how the modules should be laid out, which is the best way which is the best layout, and so I had to redo parts of it. But yeah. As I said, we cover more or less the entire base installation. One of the nice features is that the firewalls, well, the IP tables configuration is sort of modularized. So if you install Apache, it will automatically enable Apache on IP tables. And for the more specific services like MouseCall and Apache and MongoDB, like 50 to 90% of the configuration of our configuration is covered by Puppet. Of course, many of the servers or many of the installations are older than 2010, and those are often not entirely covered, but all the newer ones that are almost entirely covered by Puppet, because I do not set up servers anymore like manually, but I directly write Puppet manifests to set up new servers. And well, as I showed you, a nice feature, for instance, is that Puppet can install the whole Xen 0 server and then some virtual machines. Unfortunately, I cannot show you that because the Debian Xen packages are a bit broken at the moment, and it doesn't really work the way it used to work like a few months ago. Okay, there's just some random tricks and things I had to learn. One of the more important points is that you should have working DNS, because Puppet uses like your host names and domains and all of that to like issue certificates, and if that doesn't work properly, it's not much fun. By default, it tries to contact your Puppet Master at puppet.yourdomain.com, or more precisely only at Puppet, so even the search domain should work. Then, as I mentioned before, you should use the conf directories, because that's the easiest way to have modular and like maintainable configuration. If that's not possible for some service, use OPIOS tool. If that still doesn't use, you might use exec with set to modify your configuration files, and grep to check if the modification is already done. it's quite ugly, but it kind of works. But you shouldn't just override complex configuration files, because if you have a, say, one server with a newer version of the configuration file, a newer version of some package with a newer version of the configuration file, then you will just overwrite all the changes that the maintainer has made, and you don't want that. Try not to create more than one module per service, and use subclasses if you need to have different configuration. You might want to use the same configuration on all of your servers if possible. For instance, if you have some servers that needs a newer kernel, why not install the newer kernel on all machines just to have like same configuration? It makes your life easier, even if it's not strictly necessary. The dependencies has some features to resolve dependencies that are missing. So if some rule fails, Puppet just basically assumes that this is due to a missing dependency, and it will try to re-execute that rule later. But still, it's kind of hard to debug and hard to see what's going on if your Puppet log is full of errors. So you should better do the dependencies properly. And just tip for Debian users, yeah, you need to enable Puppet then. Yeah. Okay. And of course, with Puppet, there are several ways to do things. That's just how we do it, and it might not be the best way to do it, but it kind of works. So, perhaps you were thinking about servers so far, but of course, well, you can use Puppet on EC2. It's really easy. Like say if you have some kind of denial of service attack, you can start some new Apache servers on EC2, add them to your DNS, and you're done, which is not too hard. And there's also a Windows client for Puppet, so I haven't really tried that, but you might be able to set up your Windows workstations and OS X, of course, with Puppet, and you can use it for like Office routers and VPN gateways, anything that basically runs Puppet. Okay, so let's see if I can get this to work. So this is just like a fresh Debian installation, and like to say, there's not much installed. Not even Puppet. Then I have another terminal which is disconnected. Let's hope that works. Well, what I'm going to do here is just run our default installation and see how it works. Okay. Luckily, the Wi-Fi is quite fast. Unfortunately, my machine isn't. See what I mean? Next thing that will happen is Puppet will try to connect to our Puppet master. So let's hope that it shows up here exactly. So just sign that. And let's restart Puppet here.
Why do you have to restart it again?
Otherwise it will take a while for Puppet to notice that the certificate is present. And
Usually it's automatically.
just to make it a bit quicker. And it starts installing like users in this case, and here you can see that it installs NTP.
You can actually run Puppet manually, so you just run Puppet Agent, the new version is Puppet Agent test, and then you actually get the whole thing in the front without the service.
You can have, but you don't need the Puppet Master. You don't even need the Puppet Master. You can execute like the Puppet manifests from a local directory if you want to. Yeah. So that's it basically. If you want to wait, probably not.
How long will that take to set up one of the services?
In this case, well, the virtual machine is a bit slow. It will take like 5 minutes to set up all the basic stuff, and then generally it's quite fast. So here's a few more. Well, the colors are not that often. Here's a few more pointers, like Puppet Labs, of course. Then there's the type reference, which will show you all the basic types that Puppet supports. You can write your own types. Usually, well, it's not really necessary, but it might be handy. There are also quite a few custom types online, but the quality varies a lot, so maybe they're usable, maybe not. Then there's this thing called Vagrant, which you can use to test Puppet manifests on some virtual machine, which I normally don't, but there are some people who like it. And yes. Wikimedia has all their server configuration in a GitHub repository. It's all done by Puppet, so it's quite an interesting read. And of course, you can contact me if you want to know more. That's it.